Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna min fadlika 'ilman wa ta'lima innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you guys all hear me? Alhamdulillah. So it's alhamdulillah, this is a very, the hadith that we will read today in our explanation, in our exploration of Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, alhamdulillah, hadiths number 11 to 14. And these hadiths that are coming up are they're not the ones that are technically complicated, but they are extremely rich in the moral lessons that they teach us and the social lessons that they teach us. I think this is a very, very important lesson, a very, very important section of the Arba'in. All of these hadith that we come to today are going to have a role to play in our lives in terms of how we deal with each other and how we deal with the world around us. So inshallah, without further ado, let's get into the first hadith, alhamdulillah. If you have questions, you can ask later at the end. Hadith number 11. Leave what makes you doubt. Leave what makes you doubt. An Abi Muhammad al-Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib سبط رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وريحانته رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال حفظت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك رواه الترمذي والنسائي وقال الترمذي حديث حسن صحيح. Okay. On the authority of Abu Muhammad, on the authority of Abu Muhammad al-Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, the grandson through the daughter of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the one who was much loved by him, who said, I memorized from the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, leave what makes you doubtful for that which does not make you doubtful. Related by Imam Tirmidhi and Imam Nasa'i, and Imam Tirmidhi says it is a hadith that is Hassan Sahih. So here we're seeing a hadith, I believe this is the first one, so far, that is not from Bukhari and Muslim. It's from Tirmidhi, and Imam Tirmidhi says Hassan Sahih. It's a very specific term that Imam At-Tirmidhi used to say about hadiths, his specific classification. It's a technical term that some say is between Hasan and Sahih, or others say there are other different meanings about what that term means to Imam Tirmidhi. But it is an authentic hadith, alhamdulillah. And you'll see how he begins it. Again, with the kunya meaning the patronym of Hassan ibn Ali, who was the grandson of the Prophet Imam Hassan radiallahu anhu, Abu Muhammad. So he named his son Muhammad after his grandfather, right? Al-Hassan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he says, As-Sibti Rasulillah. The Sibt and the Hafid, the difference between those two words in Arabic is that the Sibt is your grandson specifically through your daughter. So your Hafid can be, it's just your grandson. The Sibt is it's your grandson through your daughter. And that's why Hassan and Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, they are called Sibtain. Usually, like even in the subcontinent, for example, they call them Sibtain. And the reason, you notice something. And then he said, the Sibti Rasulillah, the you could say the grandson through the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, and also Rihanatihi. Rihana is and his fresh, sweet smelling herb. The Prophet ﷺ referred to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhuma as this sweet smelling sprig. Like he said that these people, these two, are like my fragrance in this life. They are the thing that fills your nostrils and your senses with joy and with pleasure. He referred to his children. He referred to his grandchildren. He used to say, these are my sons. He used to say that this son of mine, saying Al-Hassan, meaning his grandson, He says he is a leader. He is a sayyid, a master. He's going to make peace between two huge groups of the Muslims. And this is exactly what happened. So you'll notice even in the beginning of the hadith, Imam Nawawi begins with a type of tenderness that the Muslims always had for Ahlul Bayt. It's a type of tenderness that we'll get to in a second. We'll get to later on as well. So what is what is the wording of the hadith? SubhanAllah. He says, I memorized from the Messenger of Allah. He doesn't say the Prophet said this. He says, I memorized it. I memorized it. And then he just said it. He didn't say that my grandfather said. And we'll talk about that a little later, why that's also significant. So what's the hadith? Very simple. Da' ma yuribuka ila ma la yuribuka. How many words is that? Like 7 words? Right? Very, very simple. Leave what makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt. That's it. But such a huge rule that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put. Firstly, there are a couple of different things. Sorry, that was supposed to come one by one. But the first thing is that we leave things for Allah's sake. So right away, the first word in the hadith is to leave. Da. It means like to let it go. Don't do it. Leave it. Abandon it. The first thing we learn from the hadith is the first word. It's a 2-letter word, leave. And this deen, what it means is this deen is about doing things, but this deen is about leaving things as well for Allah's sake. We often think that Islam is a list of, basically we have to do all these good deeds. But sometimes the good deed that you can do is just to leave something, to drop something. And that when you love someone, there are certain things you're going to have to leave in order to respect their love, right? Generally speaking, when you get married, you love your spouse, you don't divide your heart. You leave the love, that type of love of any other potential person for your spouse. When you have a child, you leave many of your interests in order to raise your child, for example. In the same way, here what's being said is that which causes you doubt, that which creates that doubt. And what kind of doubt is that? What are the things that cause doubt? Are we talking here about waswasa? Are we talking here about self-doubt? No, that's not the doubt they're talking about. It goes back to the previous hadith that we did in the Arba'in as well. Right? Innal halala bayyinun wal harama bayyinun. And that the halal is very clear and the haram is very clear. And between those two things, there are doubtful matters. So what we're talking about, what makes you doubt, is not like, I'm not sure if I can make the basketball team. I'm not sure if he loves me. I'm not sure if this is, pure, impure, or I'm not sure if I did this or if I didn't do. That's not what the doubt is about. That's not what they're talking about. It's what causes you doubt, meaning, does Allah like this or not? Is this going to be something that Allah wants me to do? Or is this going to get me more into a problem, into a sin, a potential sin? And so what it tells us immediately as well, number one, that part of deen is leaving things for Allah's sake, right? And the other thing is that things which cause us doubt are to be avoided. They're not good for us. For example, right? And this leads to the third point, which is safety in religion. So it is praiseworthy for a person to seek a deen of safety and to seek a deen of being sure, yaqeen, of certainty. Because a person whose heart is sure and certain, their heart is strong. Their heart is strong. A person who is constantly flip-flopping and in doubt and not sure, and constantly relative and subjective, that person, they don't have a foundation. So they're always, and actually you'll notice this and you'll see this, right? Even when it comes to, of course, not on every issue, we don't have to be firm and take a stand. You can say, I don't take a stand on certain issues. This is getting away from the exact point. But the point is, when you see people who are very often dedicated towards a cause or an issue, they know exactly where they stand. They're often also the people who are able to achieve the most for their cause. Whereas people who are kind of like willy-nilly, not really sure, that type of person, they can't take a firm stand on anything. And so safety in religion, the reason why we do that is because we don't want to end up in the haram. And the doubtful is the one step before the haram. So you're in the halal. You don't just jump right into the haram. Usually there's a doubtful area that's in between. You know, how often is it? You know, guy likes girl, you know, okay, you like somebody. That's normal. It's normal to be attracted to someone. But you know what's haram, so you're not going to do the haram. You don't want to go all the way, do something bad. So there's a doubtful area in between. And then you start kind of like getting into that a little bit. All right, let's just exchange numbers. Let's go out to this place. Hey, let's just spend this time together. Let's be texting late into the night, for example. So immediately you're like kind of wondering, I don't know, is that something I should be doing or not? Right? You're wondering if, you know, there's a type of investment to be made. And everyone's like, bro, man, you gotta invest in this thing. Look how much money we've made already. And you're like, yeah, but look at that company. It does this and it does that. I'm not really sure. You speak to the ulama. Some of the ulama are like, yeah, it's too new for us to understand. We're still researching it, you know? And so you're like, I don't know. This is causing me doubt. I'm wondering. So this is where the Prophet says, leave that which makes you doubt. Because if you keep going around in what makes you doubt, you will become accustomed and you will become normalized in dealing with doubtful matters. And when you become normalized in dealing with doubtful matters, all of a sudden, the safety of religion that comes from having a sure heart, you don't care about that anymore. Hey, is this okay? Is this okay to do? I don't know. I'm just doing it. I think so. Hey, if it's not clearly, so this is why the Prophet is saying this, and the Prophet also added to this. Right? There's an addition that in the Hadith. There is also a very important addition that helps us to determine exactly how to determine what is right and what's wrong. There's another riwayah where the Prophet said, "Inna sidqa tuma'nina wal kadhib riba." Because why? So leave that which makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt, because truth is something that brings peace to your heart. And a lie and falsehood is that which brings doubt. So many times, the reason why there's safety in terms of going with what does not make you doubt is there's a proof here that many times what is true and what is right, it's that thing which when you do it, you just feel like, you feel relieved of that doubt. You're like, you know what, looking back, I think I did the right thing. Why? Because I have a clear heart, a clear conscience, right? Whereas the lie is the one that like, I'm not sure, man, I don't really know. Should I be on this website? I'm not really sure. Oh, look, oh my gosh, what's that? Oh my God, I'm not really sure if I should keep doing it. And when you just shut it off, you're like, you know what, forget it, man. I'm just going to shut it off. Tell yourself, see, it wasn't that bad. Alhamdulillah. So there are many things that this hadith deals with. And this hadith is also the command to do this, as the ulama say, is not a command of fard. So anytime it makes you doubt, the Prophet is not saying you must leave it. No. It is nadab. Nadab is it is something that is mandub. It is something that is superior to do and praiseworthy to do. You are rewarded for it. SubhanAllah. If there's no Muslim that leaves something that is doubtful to them, except that Allah will reward them, and that Allah will give them something better. I once went to a shawarma joint near a masjid, and so I was like, this is the time. These are when I was younger and before I went abroad, and so I was like, there's two clearly religious brothers who are making the shawarmas. I said, brother, is this it's a foolish question to ask, to be honest with you. Is your meat halal? If you see people are clearly religious and Muslim, and it says halal everywhere, then, is your brother's meat halal? Do you have any proof for that, certification for that? And I was like, oh, and they said, no, we don't, but we get it from this place. And they could see what I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I should really trust it. Now, for me personally, I don't behave like that. I'm not like that anymore. You can if you choose to be like that, but I do have a different way of approaching it, which, if a practicing religious Muslim says it's halal, or even if a Muslim says it's halal, I would believe it unless I have reason to suspect otherwise. But there are different people who have different standards of it, and that's fine for them. And so I started saying, where's the proof of that, whatever. And he told me something so profound. He said, brother, if you don't feel comfortable, leave it. Don't eat it. Because you don't leave anything that is doubtful. in your heart except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you reward for it. I was shocked. Here he has a new operation. It's like a new place. I'm like, oh, it's a new joint. Either people get angry when you ask them, or they start defending themselves a million times. He just said, brother, you don't worry. You just leave it for the sake of Allah. I was shocked. Does a guy like that need a certificate now to prove something? A person like that who would tell me, one of his first customers, to walk away. So this is amazing, because immediately what that did, as-sidq tuma'nina, it gave me such a peace in my heart that I knew he was telling the truth. Right? And this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ is saying, and it's true. When someone says the truth, it just sits in your heart. You say, okay, all right, no problem. And I ate. There was no more riba after that. There was no more la yuribuka. Like there's no ma yuribuka. It was like, all right, do I know what to do? And so this is the thing about Deen. Sometimes it's about asking your heart. The Prophet ﷺ said, sometimes we will not be able to get the ruling on something. Sometimes you'll check as many websites, you still won't be satisfied. Sometimes you'll be in the thick of a situation. Okay, you don't have any data or something like that. You can't call somebody. You just have to make a judgment call. So sometimes it's just you in the situation. That's the point. It's you and Allah, maybe a third person, maybe an item, maybe a website. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ said, istafti qalbak. He said, take a fatwa from your heart. Not when you can take a fatwa from, the mufti. No, it doesn't mean that take a fatwa from your heart instead of going towards the ulama and the mujtahideen. No, it means you're in a situation where you just don't know what the truth is. And this is where, as well, the Sahaba would always try to err on the side of you know what, I'll stick with what I know is halal, right? Because at the end of the day as well, you're rewarded for that. But not only that, if you don't have sure knowledge, then you wait. Now, what's the difference between this? It is a matter of recommendation. The Prophet ﷺ is not saying every time you feel doubt, avoid. Otherwise, that means every time you go to a cafeteria and you're not sure, then you have to stop. No. Go ahead. You have permission to get into something that causes you doubt. It doesn't mean that matter is doubtful. Remember something. There's a difference between you doubt and the matter is doubtful. I cannot say, if I go to a restaurant and I'm not sure if they have a halal certificate, I cannot say that meat is doubtful. I can say I have doubt. There's a difference. Something that is morally doubtful is something that the ulama will say that the signs of halal and haram in this are mixed. But you doubting that does not make that a fatwa. So you have to be very careful as well. People mix that up often, right? There's a difference between doing something for yourself and giving a ruling. And so this comes into all different rulings, not just food. It comes into marriage. It comes into your dealings with other people, monetary. It comes into you want to marry someone from back home and you just have like a nagging doubt that was this person breastfed by my mother, or were we both breastfed by an auntie? Even though we all, extended family, and you're like, I don't know. This is where the recommendation is there. But if you went ahead, it's not haram for you. It's not haram. But it just gives you that peace of heart, right? And now the other issue that happens is we hear often about the stories of the Salaf who would leave like huge amounts of wealth. Like there was one story of an early Muslim who was left something like 500,000 dirhams or something by his father. And he just left it completely. Why? Because he had a doubt that maybe my dad got this from a haram means. Couldn't prove it. So it's not actually doubtful in itself, in its ruling. No, it's a person's income, but gave him a sense of doubt. So he left it. For example, Imam Abu Hanifa, they say that when a goat was stolen, was it Imam Abu Hanifa? I'm forgetting this, who was. When a goat was stolen in his locality, he wouldn't eat. Was it Imam Abu Hanifa? You remember this? He would not eat meat. He would not eat goat meat for a number of years. Okay, because a goat was stolen, and so he doesn't want it to end up in his food, because it might go around to a different person. A butcher gets it, and then you end up eating it. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody has to now. A chicken was stolen. Now, nobody in Toronto eat chicken or something like that. That's not what they're saying. It's saying that was what caused him. So he was at the level of wara. Wara is that scrupulousness. He was at that level. However, So we say, oh man, that's a huge level of that. So it doesn't mean we have to follow that. In fact, many times we should not follow that. Many times we tell people, no, do not follow that level of caution. Why? Because from them, it was coming from a level of having covered all their bases in Deen in every single way. And then they practiced this as a way of getting closer to Allah. Whereas today, we have so many flaws, so many areas we have to work on, character, honesty, backbiting, our income, where are our gazes going. But then a person gets religious and they start nitpicking on these few issues and getting religious based on I'm super religious in my food and then just totally lax on other things. I don't serve my parents, I argue back with them. But when it comes to purification or when it comes to halal, I'm very, very particular. And so that is something you have to watch out for. The stories of the Sahaba and the early companions, they're not there to make us all come up to that standard. No, it's to remind us of caution in Deen. It is to remind us of safety. It is to remind us that people came before who were like this. And the reason why their stories were shared was because there were people other Muslims who found that even in their time, they found that amazing. So in our time, however, you have the danger of waswasa and the danger of OCD, which is perhaps, in my opinion, for the beginner student of knowledge, it is shaitan's number one direct attack on a student. And this is where they can't understand, oh man, it said whatever makes you doubt. So now I have to go to what doesn't make me doubt. So I have to keep washing and I have to keep wiping and I have to keep saying my shahada over and over. And this is not what the hadith is saying. In fact, it's saying the opposite. You have to leave what makes you doubt because there's a qaida, a rule in fiqh, right? It's al-yaqeen la yuzalu bi-shak, right? So that certainty is not removed by doubt. Certainty is not removed by doubt. Anything that causes you doubt and you're not sure, you don't act like that's the ruling of it. No, you go back to the default, and the default is soundness. The default is purity. The default is validity. The default is iman. So when it comes to a Muslim, all of their acts and just in the world itself, when it comes to food, when it comes to many other things, the default is that this is okay, it's good, it's fine. Yes, if it's meat or if it's sexual relations, those are two things, in terms of who you get married to. Those are two things where you have to have a level of knowledge. For example, if you just see meat, if you don't have any other knowledge of it and it's in a non-Muslim place, you don't assume it's halal. But in terms of every other thing, is my prayer okay? Is my wudu okay? Is my iman intact? Do I fear Allah enough? You always assume on the safe side. So you err away from caution and towards mercy. You err on the side of mercy for that. And this is why even this hadith, people misunderstand it. Leave that which makes you doubt for that which does not make you doubt. So they keep trying to seek certainty in doing an action over and over, and it's opposite. That which makes you doubt is that gray area. So you leave that and you go back to that which does not make you doubt, meaning I knew I had wudu. I knew that from before. So now I'm not sure, is it complete? So I assume I have wudu. I am a Muslim. Is that thought going to be something that affects my iman? Then you go back to that which gives you no doubt, meaning I know I'm a Muslim from before. So that's the way that you look at the hadith. It's not to misinterpret it. So that's very important. And so this hadith is a very, very important hadith. It's a safety of religion. It tells us as well about the love of the prophetic household. Inside the hadith, it's just, there's so many benefits about hadith. There's side benefits coming into it. And it also tells you the value of memorization as a child. Because he's saying, Hafidhtu min Rasulillah, kada, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was how old? Maybe about not more than 8 to 9 years old when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Okay, it was his own beloved grandfather. But he kept this hadith, and because of a child memorizing something from their grandparent, he's not Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he's not memorizing hundreds and thousands of hadith because he knows he's trying to preserve teachings. He's a child. And so this is out of love. So the value of memorization for children is very, very important. We realize this today from the hadith. My kids, alhamdulillah, growing up back in Jordan, they memorized many things, many things. And they forgot it all. They forgot it all. So at first I was like, well, what's the point? You guys memorized all these things as children. Now where is it? But the minute they heard a line of it or two of it, They'd be, oh yeah, they'd be able to follow it along. Why? Because this is the value of memorization as a child. It's something that keeps coming back. So this is why we teach our children things at that age, as they say, because that learning something in childhood is kanaqsh fil hajar. It's like writing it into stone. Whereas learning something in your older age is like writing inside the ocean. It doesn't stay, And then the final thing is to understand that what is it that causes you to get doubt and not have doubt? What is the barometer of that? The heart is the barometer of that. The heart is the measure. So it tells you that your deen sometimes does not go back to a book or a text or a rule. Sometimes it just goes back to your heart at the end of the day. You are your heart. Okay? So keep it clean. When you keep it clean, you will have a sense of sureness in your religion about what to do. When you're stuffing your heart with all these different things, as we'll see in the next hadith, that's what causes that cloudiness and that doubt. The next hadith is also another very, very significant hadith. And it actually comes right into to this very thing. And by the way, in the previous hadith as well, before we go on to this hadith, one of the commentators made a very, very important point. It tells you about priorities in religion, right? Do things that that you're sure of before getting into other things that you're not sure about. So it's the idea of the understanding priorities, right? It was a man came to one of the tabi'een, I believe it was Hassan al-Basri, and he came from Iraq, and he said, does the blood of a gnat, is that impure? Is that impure? So Imam Hassan al-Basri said, you guys, and he meant to generalize, but he mean people in Iraq killed Imam Hussein. You're not asking about that blood. You're asking about the blood of a mosquito. Because now why did he say that? Because the affair and the matter at the time was to look at the big picture about what's going on, to look at the big picture. And you're coming to ask me this question, but have you thought about the bigger pictures in your deen? Have you covered the bigger bases in your deen? Right? So yes, you do ask questions about things, but he might have had an insight that this person needs to have a lot more of the basis of their education and their deen has to be firm before you go into other things. The next hadith is the hadith number 12. It's called minding your own business, right? The very famous hadith where عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من حسن الإسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. من حسن الإسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. Again, look how many words that is. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 words, and literally contains a universe of knowledge and more. This is hadith sahih. Hadith Hassan, Rahu Tirmidhi wa Ibn Majah. This is a Hassan hadith. So this is the first hadith now that's at the level of Hassan. But what does it show us as well? It shows us that Hassan hadith they're authentic. Just like a Sahih hadith as well. Right? Again, from non-Bukhari and Muslim sources. And what is the translation? On the authority of Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, who said, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, part of the perfection and beauty of one's Islam is that they're leaving that which does not concern them. From the beauty of a person, in other words, from the beauty of a person's Islam is to leave that which does not concern them, meaning mind your business. It's from the beauty of Islam to mind your business. That's from Imam Tirmidhi. There are many, many beautiful things about this. Firstly, right? Min husn al-Islam al-mar'i, of the most beautiful things of a person's Islam. So what it tells you is that, immediately it tells you Islam is not just an outward thing. Islam is not just, how did you dress? How many rakahs did you read? How many subhanallahs did you say? Those are all very nice things, very amazing things. But many times we consider deen and religion to be something that is ritual and something that is visibly Islam, quote unquote Islamic. But rarely do we say, what about our behavior? What about just the way that we are with things, how we look at the world, how we spend our time, right? This hadith tells us a lot about that. Min husn al-Islam, the beauty of one's Islam. So it tells you as well that Islam is something that is beautiful, and it's something that when you practice it, it makes you beautiful too. If someone who practices Islam should be a person that anyone in their society can say, this is a beautiful person. If you are practicing Islam and some people think you're an ugly person, there's some deficiency in your Islam. Because, unless they're saying like, oh, you eat meat, you're an ugly person. Unless their aqidah is spoiled. But anytime you have this issue where, you're rough with people, you're like this with people, like people have a problem with you. This is why oftentimes a very, very good, it's very, very, we have one blessing about living in a non-Muslim society. One of the blessings, many blessings of actually living in a mixed society is you can always just like measure yourself up to, how do the non-Muslims that I know, how do they see me? The people I work with, my neighbors, people who wouldn't be partial to me just because you have a hijab or a beard. People who won't overlook your faults just because, you take some classes or you go to, whatever. People who won't overlook that. People who will hold you to a common standard, right? Because many times when we look at other Muslims, we overlook certain standards. Like, he yells at his wife, but he's always in the masjid. Like, no, that's not the type of Muslim, But with a non-Muslim, they don't have any of that. You could go and be in the first row of the masjid, for every single day of your life, for 5 times a day. But, if yelling is coming from your house, all the time, then they know that that's not a balanced person. So this is why when the beauty of a person's Islam, beauty is something that's apparent. And if that beauty isn't showing up, then that's a bit of an issue. And we have to address that. So it's about a beautiful Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ also did, he used that term very, very purposely. He didn't say the most scrupulous of a person's Islam. He didn't say the most pious of a person's Islam. He said the most beautiful of a person's Islam. Because beauty is something that any sound intellect cannot deny. And then you also have this idea again, is tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. Tark means to leave. Tark means, again, to leave something. So again, you have the idea of leaving something. So it's not just about I do this and I do that and I do this. It's like, yes, but do you leave things for Allah's sake as well? Or do you just do whatever you... So it's not like Islam isn't just something where it's a buffet. Like you just take what you want and that's it. It's you take some things that you like, but you leave what's not good for you as well. Right? Some people think that I can carry all of my bad qualities. I'll just do good deeds. And that's enough for me. So the thing is, the idea of leaving something, what is that? What one of my shaykh calls it is editing your experience. And that was a very, very good way of putting it, right? It's about editing your life experience. From the first one, it's what causes you doubt. From the second one, it's not your business. What does that mean? I mean, we see so many things every day that aren't our business. Remember, the time when this hadith is being mentioned is, traditionally Muslims probably lived in villages, most of them. Minding your own business meant what? You hear your parents, squabbling about something. Instead of getting into it, or your dad is talking to your mom about financial issues, instead of saying something, it's minding your business. It's about hearing something coming from the neighbor's house, minding your business. It's about going and seeing, something new this person is wearing and something that's happening. Then you heard somebody divorce someone else and this marriage isn't a problem and this guy got caught with this. And so that's all what used to happen, the gossip and the stories and the looking out, keeping up with the Joneses. That was all not minding one's business. Now it's increased to a great extent. Why? Because the minute we open our phones, we're seeing forwards from WhatsApp. If you're on Instagram or if you're on Facebook, sometimes you don't have a choice. You see the reels, you see YouTube. There's so many things which do not concern us. And honestly, it is a plague of our societies. And even non-Muslims, they're the first to say that the increase of irrelevance is something that is plaguing the mind. It's filling the human brain. So if that's what it does to the human mind, that it fills the human mind, divides your attention, reduces your attention span, decreases the quality of relationships, increases depression, increases anxiety, increases body dysmorphia, increases comparison, envy, increases all these things. And when you look at, if that's what it just mentally, what about the heart? What about people who are not even thinking about the heart, right? So there's that idea of editing it out. asking ourselves, is this really my business or not? And what it starts with is there's obviously a barometer, right? There's the idea of leaving, first of all, what is haram? That's like for sure. It does not have any relevance to us. That means gossip. That means, like the other day on Facebook, because I share some of these classes and stuff on my Facebook page. To be honest, people are sharing a video of a religiously dressed guy like at some party dancing with a bunch of ladies. And they're saying, oh, look at the movie, look at the whatever, what's he doing? Why is he, and I'm just like, dude, okay, some like religious guy got caught, got filmed at a party, shouldn't have been doing that. We don't know what the whole situation was. Somebody said it might be his wives or something, his sisters, we don't know. But, is it something that you should be like watching and forwarding and like a juicy post about, an expose of Sheikh so-and-so, Imam so-and-so. And, it's like, why are you, or someone's refutation on someone else? Why are we getting into haram? Why are we learning about the haram? Sometimes it happens when it comes to YouTube videos and, I just need to know what affair this person was having with this other person. Why? Why do you need to know that? Why do we need to know that? In fact, the reason why it's on the media and on the websites and the blogs is because it's clickbait. It's clickbait. Is this movie actor going out with this actress? Is this person, so-and-so was seen with so-and-so. And so you click on it. So there's so many things. That's from the perspective of the haram and the things that are like disgusting. Then there's the stuff, again, which is doubtful, which is like, do I need to know this? Is there something really necessary? And then it comes to even leaving some of the things that are permissible. So they talk about this, that, even there's an information overload. Many of us are information junkies, okay? And we just want to get into everything, know everything. And in reality, to be honest with you, I'm like this myself. I'm the type of person that, when I was young, I'd be like, if I'm in the bathroom, I'm reading all the shampoo labels and on the soap labels and what's in the toothpaste. And even when I'm taking a shower, I'm looking at this is my mentality, right? Because basically reading was my activity that I was basically raised to do. So we have to be careful about that, because you can spend, hours on Wikipedia jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping. Oh, great. I've learned about, this battle in World War I, and then we went to this type of food in Poland, and but what is that doing to your mind? I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. And so the other thing is, like, now the question is, why don't we mind our own business, and why should we mind our business? There are a couple of things I want to mention, right? This is just from the worldly perspective. And we don't use the worldly perspective as the basis, but we use the hadith as the basis. And then we look at what's happening in the world, which is, so I'll read this out. A new study by researchers at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business has found that information acts on the brain's dopamine-producing reward system in the same way as money and food. In other words, information and facts about things give you sometimes a little bit of a hit when you learn it, as just like having a chocolate bar or getting a little bit of money, like gambling, for example, na'udhu billah. So it gives you a dopamine hit to get a new fact and a new fact and a new fact. So imagine we're living in a time when it's not just like one person, one auntie, coming up to you and going, pss, pss, it's like all over the internet, and it's just all the time. So you're just constantly getting this. And so what happens is, even, what they call like the evolutionary biology, their explanation is that we're created, or I should say, they don't say that, but we say, the way that we evolved, they will say, is that in early times when people were out in, hunting, and they had all these different threats coming to them, they had to be aware of all the different things going on around them. Is that a sound I hear of a lion? Is that, I'm smelling something. Is that something burning? Is that food in the distance? Is this, I'm feeling this, I'm tasting this. So the idea of taking information is something that we are wired to do, because it's a survival mechanism. The more you know about your surroundings, in a dangerous surrounding, you're always watching your back, always getting, so that's something that is a survival tool. What happens when those threats go away? What happens when we're not on that heightened, fight or flight? We still have that addiction towards information. And so the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, why is he speaking about that which doesn't concern you? Because we are wired to look at things which interest us. If it's not interesting, you wouldn't go towards it. That's for sure. Like if it wasn't interesting, you wouldn't go towards it. But at that any given point in time, you need a hit of information. And this is the whole thing about and so this is the quote from the professor. To the brain, information is its own reward, above and beyond whether it's useful. Whether it's useful. So la ya'nihi, it does not concern him, meaning it's not useful to you. Said Associate Professor Ming Su, a neuroeconomist. And just as our brains like empty calories from junk food, they can overvalue information that makes us feel good, but may not be useful. What some may call idle curiosity, right? As they say, curiosity killed the cat, right? You stuck your head into, a hole that you weren't supposed to, and you got bitten off. And this is the whole thing about that curiosity. Now, this is another very interesting few points, right? Again, that comes not from our literature, but from Western studies and literature. Why don't people mind their business? Why? It's very important for us to understand this. Why am I going into a little bit of the science and psychology of it? Because at the end of the day, if we understand why that's triggered, we can help to stop it. Because we're not in that time. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like how often do you have something like that's other people's business? Like, oh, you got one extra goat. I mean, it's like nowadays, if it was just that, alhamdulillah. But the reason why we have to go towards this is because there's a battle now for our attention and our very minds, right? And we're losing that battle if we're on a phone or if we're on a computer. So the first thing is that why don't people mind their own business? Number one, they think they know better, right? This is one thing. They think they know better. So they're like, okay, for me, it's like, oh, I can tell you, I can solve this problem for you. Or you have this debate, I know the answer to the debate. Or you got into, a person got caught having an affair. Oh, I know that they shouldn't have done the affair, so I'm going to read about it and kind of look down on them, right? So you think you know better. The other thing is, a person doesn't mind their own business when they're disconnected from themselves and Allah. So immediately when you turn, they say the qalb is the heart, is something that flip-flops. That's why it's called the qalb. So it can only turn towards one thing at a time. So when you turn to something that you don't have a value or benefit in, it means you've turned away from Allah at that point and yourself. Because if it's not beneficial, la ya'nihi, what does it mean? Let's go back. La ya'nihi, what does it mean? It means something that does not have any benefit for you in the world or in the next life. I should have clarified that. So what does it mean? It means if it affects your money, your job, your food, drink, your family, your health, all of these things are in the world, but they are what concerns you, even though they are quote unquote worldly. So if a competitor comes into my business, I want to know about that competitor. That's not world. That's not la ya'nihi. That concerns me, right? If there's a new way of coding something or paying on my website, I need to know that. So people think it means, again, what only concerns you in the hereafter. No. It means what concerns you in this life and the next life. So your business, your family, that concerns you. Your health, that concerns you, right? Now, other people's business, other people's families, that doesn't concern you. Or it's for the next life, right? So Deen. And Deen encompasses the dunya and the akhirah. It's not disconnected. So the minute you connect to something that does not value you or concern you, you disconnected from yourself. And the reason why there are some people who constantly mind other people's business. They're always talking about somebody else, always looking into other things. It's because they're so disconnected with themselves. They've no longer they're just looking outward. And this is another problem with virtual reality. This is a problem with the escape mentality of our social media and digital media. It makes you look out. You're looking into another world. If you're always looking out the window, it doesn't give you time to just sit back and connect with yourself. How often are you on, scrolling through social media and thinking about Allah? It's very rare. The other thing is that you have nothing better to do. So that's the third reason why people don't mind their own business, because you have not put constructive things into your life such that you're like, oh, I better go pray now, or I could do this now. Instead, you've created idle time for yourself. And as I say, the idle mind is the devil's workshop. So if you don't put something in your life that's better to do, that's when you have the mindless scrolling and stuff. Sometimes you even have those better things to do, but you don't do it. And that's another thing that we can get to. So having something better to do. Number 4 is, so the other thing is, sorry, this is worded wrong. Your business is better than their business. No, it's opposite. Another reason why people don't mind their business is because they think that the other person's business is better than what their business is. So you would rather look at the homes of the rich and famous than your own home. right? This is a result of comparison and envy. This is another reason why people don't mind their own business. Oh, look how she looks. Look what she's wearing. Did you see how she's talking? This kind of comparison and envy. You're thinking, but at the same time, you're like, oh, look how good that guy, that person's car looks, that person's job. So you are implicitly saying that what you have, I like it. What I have is not as important. Because if you thought what you had was important, you wouldn't turn away from it. Isn't that true? Right? A very, very wealthy person does not get distracted by a less wealthy person's business. It's not really something that they would get distracted by. The fifth thing is that they don't have a purpose. So a reason why people don't mind their business, not only because they don't have something better to do, but they just don't even have a reason for why they're there. So what is the purpose of your existence? This is why we as Muslims know the purpose of our existence. Why are we here? To worship Allah. What are all the things that we do every day around? It's to obey Allah, to worship Allah, to get close to Allah, to win the pleasure of Allah and the love of Allah. Right? Immediately that gives us a purpose. Other people who don't have that, subhanAllah, if they have free time, what do they fill it with? This is why they call it a pastime. Muslims, in reality, other than to relax in order to go back to your worship, we don't have what they call the pastime as such a hobby that you're just killing time. Because for us, time itself is our deen. It's our good deeds. It's the capital that Allah has given us. And I'm saying this as someone who I can see how much time is wasted, even in my own life, from all of these social media and reading this and reading that. Many times people will send you things. People will forward something to you. And, my first gut reaction is I got to watch it because they said they sent it to me. Now I'm going to have to start saying, do I really need to watch it? Do I need to do that? Maybe I don't need to. Okay. So it's having a purpose. What am I doing? What's my evening for? What is my life for? The other thing is people don't mind their own business because they're unhappy. They're unhappy and they don't want to focus back on their happiness. So some people take to drink. Some people take to other types of drugs, escapism. Right? It's an escapist fantasy. So minding other people's business reminds them, takes them away from remembering their own unhappiness. The other reason why people don't mind their own business is they feel unworthy themselves and they have hidden insecurities. So they need to say something in order to feel important. And this is especially in, for example, you're on social media. And sometimes I do this, like, okay, a friend brings up a point, some controversial topic. I might write a response to it. And then I'm just like, why do I need to wade into this? Do I just need people to give me a thumbs up, a like? Do I need to say that I've said something? And many times, again, in a party or you're in a gathering and you just need to fit yourself into the conversation. So you get into someone else's business or start commenting, oh, you know him, you know what he's doing in his family. And it's often because you feel like you need to say something intelligent in order to feel recognized. So there's an insecurity there that if I stay quiet, no one's going to like me, right? And it's the fear of being irrelevant. This is also why it's very important to nurture good relationships in your family and in your community. Because your friend, someone who really likes you and loves you, will not need you to say something irrelevant in order to value you. You'll never need to feel like, I need to speak up in order to feel, so your insecurities are taken care of. Nowadays, we don't have those close relationships, so people are quite insecure. The other thing is, when people don't mind their own business because you think you can go out to save people, that's another problem. That's another big problem. So everyone who has a misconception, you're going to refute them. Everyone who has a misconception. It's your job to straighten out why their aqidah isn't correct. You see a sister who, has a picture of herself up on her social media. Now all of a sudden it's every guy's job to go into her profile and look at the pictures that they're not supposed to be looking at and like comment on each one. Sister, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. It's like, it's not your job to save everyone and to go into a bar and pull out drunk people. That's not your job. Yes, if something comes across you where you can help, then, as we'll see later on, you have to do that. And finally, the next thing is people often don't mind their own business because they need help. They need help and they don't want to get it. They're not addressing their own problems or they're afraid of facing what's within them, right? So going back, those are the things that we learn about. And, So these are why we don't mind our own business. So how do we train the ego? How do we now train the ego to curb idle curiosity? The first thing is that we try to inculcate in us, right, a sense of modesty. a sense of modesty. So a sense of haya. So for example, we tell ourselves, okay, I don't need to, shyness. Let's start with this first. When we mean haya, people think it just means dressing a certain way, and it's not. People think it means behaving like bashful. No, that's not what haya means. Haya means you have a little bit of shame so that you don't ask people uncomfortable questions. And when I heard this definition of haya, it really changed my life. Because many times, we have this tendency like, oh, you didn't come to masjid, or you were very long in the bathroom. Like, oh, what's happening? Something like that. You'll ask people embarrassing questions, not thinking, is this something that will embarrass the person or not? And so sometimes it's just understanding, have a little bit of modesty, meaning, you're shy to ask people things that might make them feel sad or bad or point out a flaw. Or you're shy to open up a topic that may not be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So developing a shyness about getting into matters and saying things is something that's very helpful. The other way to help curbing what is not relevant to one is to start with the haram. So start with the big stuff, right? And say, okay, my reading horoscopes or reading tabloids, I don't need to do that. I don't need to watch the podcast of, this guy and the girl where I'm very distracted by the girl or something like that. So immediately you're cutting out the haram. And when you start to cut out the haram, right, then as your filter gets more and more fine, that's when you can start going to like, okay, is there even a point for me to read news from this type of website? There might be something more reputable, for example. So we start to control where we go, what we visit, start to limit certain things, but you have to put things in place. So another problem is this: if we just cut out everything today that we do online, would we have enough stuff in reality to be able to fill our mind and our attention? That's a big problem. And I'm just being very honest. If you told me, like, get offline, okay, let's do it. I can do it if we're going for Umrah. I used to do it. I never used to have a mobile phone. I never wanted one, a smartphone. But now it's like, such a part of like checking this, checking that. But the way to do it is create alternatives in your life that are healthy and productive. So this is why I just went the other day and I made myself a library card. I'm new here, so it's, and I was like, okay, let me get out a real book. I have a lot of books, but let me also now go and just choose something that has a time limit on it, that is interesting, that is not in my normal field, just so I can just, draw my interests into other things. So we often do that because we're not giving ourselves enough things. A sport, for example, getting yourself into a sport, getting yourself into other types of constructive hobbies. So it's about training and curbing the ego. And then when it gets to the higher and higher levels, and this is where it comes into treading a spiritual path. It's about saying, what's in this for Allah, for every single thing you do. And that means it even comes to the point where a student of knowledge or a one who is treading a spiritual path, when they have to do some thrilling thing, like going on a roller coaster or something, they still even ask themselves, oh Allah, what's in this for you? What is in this for you? And if something is not in it for Allah, they're just like, all right, you guys enjoy. I'm okay. Why? Because they're more interested in if something is there for Allah. Or what they do is they make an intention for Allah. They make an intention for Allah. And if they can't find an intention for Allah, that's when you know that it's better to let it go. Right? So can I justify going to, a nightclub for Allah? I can't. Can I justify, reading a very trashy website just for news when I know there's going to be, many other pictures of models and naked people and scandals? No. Where's my intention for Allah? So if you're stuck with I really can't make an intention for Allah, that's when you know it's time to go. And the other thing is that this hadith tells us is the Muslim always strives for noble and lofty things. In our lives, we have to train ourselves in the same way that people have high taste in clothing or in food. We have to train ourselves to have high taste in things. You be a quality person. Be a person where, not just, and the funny thing is, if you do that, it'll rub off in other things and actually make you a bit more polished in a worldly sense too. But be a little stingy when it comes to what gets your attention, right? A very wealthy investor, it's hard to get their their attention. An executive for a record company, not anybody can audition for them. That's how the world is. So imagine for someone whose sights are set on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you put on a video for them, the first thing they think is, all right, what is this? What are you showing me? In fact, before you even show it to them, they'll be like, okay, what am I watching? Oh, send this question. Here's a YouTube video. Can you watch it, 10 minutes of it and answer this question? No, you just tell me what it said and I'll answer you the question, for example. So strive for noble and lofty things and leave the paltry. One of the first things I heard when I went to Jordan, alhamdulillah, it still stayed with me till today. This deen is about 4 things. It revolves around 4 things. حب الجليل وبغض القليل واتباع التنزيل وخوف التحويل. Number 1, loving the majestic, Allah. Number 2, leaving off that which is paltry. In fact, it means hating that which is paltry. Why? Because people, when they get to a level where Allah means everything to them, they begin to dislike anything that is paltry and they hate it. Like, you're wasting my time, right? Number 3 is following the revelation. And number 4 is always be worried that you might change back. Meaning back to the bad way that you were. So just because you made it, just because you're at a certain high, don't lose sight of the fact that it's not from you, it's from Allah. So if you're distracted, you can just slip down to the way that you were before. You can always go back to those websites. You can always go back to that swearing habit. You can always pick up a cigarette again. Whatever it is, your eyes can go everywhere. You have to be very careful. You have to be very careful all the time. And finally, so that's what we'll read about in the hadith. So honestly, these hadiths are like a world to themselves. It's enough to say, though, that the Prophet ﷺ did mention, a man passed away, and one of the Sahaba said, inshallah, he'll have the good news of paradise. The Prophet ﷺ said to him, how do you know that he didn't say something which does not concern him? Or he wasn't stingy in an area where it was no loss for him. So all of a sudden in the hadith, it tells us that you just getting into something that doesn't concern you can actually be something that doesn't get you an automatic entry into Jannah, because it's like, wait, maybe you went into someone's reputation. So inshallah khair. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful things to say, but we'll get to the next hadith inshallah. And that is hadith number 13. Sorry. Hadith number 13 is, love for your brother what you love for yourself. Love for your brother or sister, your fellow human being, what you love for yourself. عن أبي حمزة أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه خادم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. Okay. So Allahu Akbar. حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. So the Prophet ﷺ, Rahul Bukhari wa Muslim. Now we're going back to Imam Bukhari and Muslim on the authority of Abu Hamza. Who is Abu Hamza? Anas ibn Malik. May Allah be pleased with him. Who is that? The servant of the Messenger of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon him. Look at the care with which Imam Nawawi introduces you to a new narrator. That the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, none of you truly believes until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. This is one of the 2 greatest they say that there are 4 hadith. Let me see if I'm jumping ahead of myself. Yeah, there are 4 hadiths that if you want to take all of the adab, the etiquettes of being good, Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, the great Maliki scholar, said that this is one of the 4 hadiths where good behavior and etiquette for other people revolves around these 4 hadiths. And the other one was, what was it? That whoever believes in Allah on the last day, then let him speak good or remain silent. That's another hadith. The other one was that min husn al-Islam from the beauty of a person's Islam is that they leave that which does not concern them. And the 4th hadith is la taghdab. The Prophet said, do not get angry. Those 4 things. If you can follow those 4 things with people, you've covered all of the good of behavior and etiquettes with people, right? So none of you truly believes. La yu'minu ahadukum. It's a very, very big thing. So does it mean that if you don't love everything that you love for yourself, for your brother, does that mean you don't believe? And this is not what the hadith is exactly trying to say, even though On the wording, it says, none of you believes. It doesn't mean you're a kafir if you don't want your friend to have the same thing you have. What it means is that there's a difference between technical faith. The basis of faith is iman. Iman is what? You believe in Allah and His messengers and His book and His, and so forth, so on and so forth, right? And His angels and so on and so forth. So that once a person has that affirmation in the heart of Allah's oneness and lordship and the messengerhood of the Prophet and all the things in the Deen, that is iman. That person is a believer. Never doubt that you're a believer. By the way, my brothers and sisters who's listening to this, never ever doubt if you are a believer. Okay? Never doubt it. You're a believer and that's it. Inshallah. Never doubt that. So the thing is that technical faith is one thing. Now what the Prophet is speaking about here is perfect faith. It is elite or a higher level of faith. And so when he says, none of you truly believes, it means none of you believes with the perfect faith. And so what it also tells us is that faith is not just saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. What it means is, you got to be good. You have to think about what is right and wrong. You have to behave in such a way that you express that faith. Because if you don't, you have technical faith. You're still a believer, a Muslim, right? But you don't have that level of faith that makes you reach to that level of a perfect faith. And where does that faith come? This is very interesting. The next point is this. It tells us, until you love. Hatta yuhib. Love is central to Islam. Love is central to Islam. This hadith is about brotherhood. Brotherhood meaning that you're concerned and looking out for your fellow human being. If that love in your heart is not there, and as some of the ulama say, it's not just your brother. It's interesting because the other person is called the brother. He didn't say, in some narrations you have li akhihi Muslim, like his Muslim brother. But you'll notice that we refer to each other as brothers and sisters. And that's one thing that really struck me when I became Muslim, right? It's like everybody calls each other brother and sister, so at least in your wording, there's an idea of closeness. You're not dealing with me as a stranger, right? And so that brotherhood, you look at another person, it doesn't just mean, that's another thing. It doesn't just mean you love for your own brother, like your blood brother. No. But it's understood by the words of the Prophet ﷺ that brother refers to everyone, because it's so understood that every single believer is like your family member. So how would you treat your family member? Let me ask you, your own brother. Do you have brothers? Do you have sisters? Yeah, you have brothers. So I don't have a brother, but for example, a person with their own brother, they want the best for their brother. Can you imagine the concern you have for your brother? Can you imagine having that for a complete stranger? I'm not saying for you, but just any of us. The way that we want the best for our brother. Can you imagine a stranger on the street? Can you imagine wanting it for that person? How lofty of iman would you have in the eyes of Allah? How much of a beautiful and selfless person would you be to go around wanting that level of good for everybody? That's a special person. This is what Islam is saying. This is perfect faith, right? And so the other thing that the hadith implies that's very interesting is hatta yuhibbu li akhi ma yuhibbu li nafsihi. So you're comparing it to what? Until you want the best for your brother? No. What you love for yourself. Because interestingly enough, the barometer, you could say, I just want good for you. I want good for you, brother. Sister, I want the best for you. But no. Do you want that for yourself? No. For myself, I want a little better. No. Because you always want the best for yourself, isn't it? I mean, isn't it like that? Usually people want the best for themselves. But you don't often do that unless you really love a person. So it takes love in order to do that, right? Let me just go back here for a second. Yeah. So it takes love to do that. And this is why immediately the Prophet ﷺ is actually saying there are things you can love for yourself. People often think that you can't have any self-love or self-interest. This hadith actually confirms that you can love things for yourself because it's natural. So anyone who's like, astaghfirullah, I don't love things for myself, I don't want, they think it's like a sin to want something for yourself. Because perhaps as well, they've been guilt-tripped for a long time in their lives. This happens a lot to, who I've seen this with? May Allah raise their rank in paradise. The mothers of our ummah. They're so used to sacrificing for other people. They're so used to sacrificing, not just our ummah, the humanity. They feel guilty to buy themselves something. They feel guilty if they have something to eat and their child doesn't have it, because they've just gotten so used to sacrificing. This is why the spiritual level of mothers is so high, right? But here it's saying you can love something for yourself. Don't feel guilty about it, as long as it's from the halal, as long as it's something that is good. So you want what you love for yourself as long as that thing is good, right? As long as that thing is good. So self-interest, the third point here. So self-interest and self-love is okay in Islam, and it's not selfishness. So what this hadith does immediately is it balances between self-love and selfishness. On one end, self-love, self-interest can become narcissism, self-obsession. Immediately, the minute you start looking out for other people the way that you look out for yourself, your self-love becomes balanced and it's not selfish any longer. It's not selfish any longer. In fact, it becomes selfless at that point. So you can love yourself and love others at the same time. And loving yourself is actually wajib. Do you know that? Loving yourself is actually a duty, because you have to love every Muslim. And you're a Muslim too. So you have to have love for yourself. So self-hate, this idea of people walk around hating themselves. If you, my brother and sister, if any of us hate themselves, I'm not talking about for a sin that you did, you don't like your nafs doing that. But if you, at the core of yourself, hate yourself, there is no Islamic justification for that, and that's not what Islam is saying for you to do. So anyone who made you feel like that or think like that, that's something you should get checked out. Speak to someone you trust, or an imam or a scholar. The other thing is that, so loving for others does not mean depriving yourself. That's a very important thing, especially in some people in the ummah. We need to uplift them, the wives and the mothers of the ummah, especially, the poor of the ummah, those people who are being marginalized, taken advantage of. And it also tells us that the Muslim is always looking at striving to help and guide other people. So they're always looking out for, your faith is not going to be perfect until you're not looking out for other people. And if looking out for other people doesn't only mean to help them, right? It also means to correct them when they need it, but in a way that they would want it. So for example, if you had some sort of really big flaw, a harmful flaw, wouldn't you want someone to help you from that? You would, right? You would. So if you see that in your brother or sister, then you have to be concerned for them. So it doesn't just mean, I want you to have $1 million. I want you to have a big house because I want that. It means I would want someone to help me out of my problem. So brother, sister, I want to help you out of your problem. But the reason why people don't react to it kindly when you try to correct them is because they know you have not invested the love in them, in that relationship, to be able to take that criticism lightly. If you give deposits into their emotional bank account and you give people what you want for yourself, when you also try to correct them because you want yourself to be corrected too, they will take it from you in a nice way. The problem is, this is why the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he corrected people didn't get angry with him, because they knew he loves me more than my parents, right? So it's about guiding others and helping others, but in a way, again, so you say, my brother, I would want someone to correct me, so I'm just correcting you. Okay, fine. But is it the way you would love to be corrected? That's the other question. So it follows into every single thing, right? It follows into until the end. If you had to fight somebody, would you fight them in the way that you would want to be fought if you were doing the same thing? Think about that. And it will stop the ego from, if you're a child, if you're correcting a child or arguing with somebody or whatever it is, are you going to be extra harsh on them, or would you hope that if you were in that position, that you would not be abused, or you would not be for example, treated in a bad way? The other thing is, this hadith teaches us about being just to others and accountability, right? So look, if you like fairness for yourself, it's not just about other people, it's about your own self. If you want justice for yourself, are you giving it to other people? If you want, you want everybody to apologize to you, you want everybody to do nice things for you, are you also holding yourself to that same level of accountability? Because you would not want another person to take you to account for something that they don't uphold themselves. So you have to now do that for others. And finally, or two things, there's the higher level. So not only wanting what you want for yourself for others, because that is if we can do that, alhamdulillah, but it's to prefer others to oneself. Ithar. That's where it comes to. Do you now prefer others? وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. As Allah says in the Quran, they prefer others to themselves even if poverty is their lot. Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bijali, radiallahu anhu, the great companion of the Prophet ﷺ, after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he sent his servant to buy a horse. He said, go buy a horse from me. The servant went to the market, met a person selling a horse. And the owner of the horse, the servant agreed, okay, we'll buy this horse off of you for 300 dirhams. 300. He said, now why don't you come back to my house, right? And my employer, Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bijali, will give you 300 dirhams. When Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bijali, radiallahu anhu, saw the horse and heard that the price is 300, so okay, I pay 300, I get the horse. He looked at the horse. He said, this horse is good quality. I'll give you 400 for it. Do you mind? So the owner said, yeah, okay, I'll take 400. And he looked at the horse again. And he's saying, this horse is worth more than that. I'll give you 5. Do you mind? He's like, yeah, I accept. He went all the way to 6, to 7, to 8, to, how much did he go up to? 8. He went up to 800,000 dirhams. Sorry, 800 dirhams. And he said, do you mind if you accept this? So the person was like, yeah, why do you keep increasing the price? Almost 3 times the price. He says, because I took a pledge from Rasulullah ﷺ that I would always sincerely be in the interest of every Muslim, of every believer. This is that hadith in practice. Very rarely would we say, if we found a great deal, would we say, brother, you're not aware, but on the market, it's going for this. That's what it means. If someone's giving you a deal, that's fine. But if someone doesn't know, they're from out of town, it's like, listen, buddy, you're selling it at prices from another country. In Canada, this thing can fetch, or in America, this can fetch a lot more. So sell it at a fair price to me. Then the person says, no, I'll sell at this price, no problem. So this is the beautiful thing about that. And finally, let's look at, there are other hadiths that talk about ways to perfect one's faith. Quickly. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. The Prophet said, none of you truly believes, again, the beginning, until I, the Prophet, am more beloved to him than his parent, child, and all of humankind put together. That's another way to perfect your faith. Love of the Prophet ﷺ. None of you truly believes until, and there's so many, there are at least 2 other narrations. Until you love, what was it? None of you truly believes until you leave off lying, even in joke, and showing off even when you deserve to show off. So it's about, what are those things here? It's about love. It's about love. And it's also about truth. Those 2 things, love and truth, take one to the perfection of Iman. The final hadith, inshallah we'll have some time for this. So the final hadith is called the prohibition of spilling blood. The prohibition of spilling blood. Bismillah. I can't see the slide. And it goes like this. عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يحل دم امرئ مسلم يشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأني رسول الله إلا بإحدى الثلاث الثيب الزاني والنفس بالنفس والتارك لدينه المفارق للجماعة رواه البخاري ومسلم. On the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, who said, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, the blood of a Muslim is unlawful to shed, except in one of 3 instances. The married person who commits adultery, a life for a life, and the one who forsakes his religion and separates from the community. Okay? So the blood of a Muslim is unlawful to shed except in one of 3 instances. The married person who commits adultery, a life for a life, and the one who forsakes his religion and separates from the community, from Bukhari and Muslim. The first thing is that people often get kind of, it's one of those controversial hadiths, people get kind of scared about this. Let's focus and let's stay with the point. We'll cover that point. The whole point of the whole point of the hadith is not to get distracted into, well, what's the punishment for apostasy? What's the punishment for, is it stoning for adultery? What does it mean, this and that? That's not the purpose and point of the hadith. In fact, we missed the whole point, which is life is sacrosanct. Life is sacred. Okay, when they mean here the blood of a Muslim, we have to remember a few, like the context of it. Number 1, so the sanctity of a Muslim. The reason why as well, right? Look at the wording of it. is the Prophet ﷺ, Islam came in a time when there were blood feuds, when people were burying their baby girls alive, when if you got angry at somebody, you took it out on someone. I mean, just up to about 200 years ago in Europe, people were fighting duels. There was one of the vice presidents of the States that like killed somebody in a duel. Can you imagine that? Like you insult somebody, insulting someone. Let's step outside, take a sword or a gun, and you shoot and you fight to death. Like this is like the society that even was up to just a little while ago, right? Even up to now, gang warfare. You've got all this stuff. So the idea of sanctity, you've got collateral damage. You've got police shooting someone because they're black. You know, we've got people being droned, you know, just because they happen to be in a certain country and Muslim or something like that. You've got, on the other hand, people lynched because they were suspected of, some blasphemy or something like that. This hadith is teaching us not about who to kill. It's telling you cannot kill. You cannot shed blood. It is la yahillu. It is not halal. It is something that is haram. And this is why when this hadith came down, just imagine that it is ruling out every type of spilling of blood. And this is where the Prophet says, except by three things. And the reason why he said that was because at the end of the day, every single place and government or society has its laws that have to function, in which they have to choose at some point in time between, is this a threat and is this something that has to be neutralized in this way? That is a governmental question. That is a question of rulership and government. That's not a question of the average person. But this is why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned those three exceptions, all of which can only be proven in a court of law in an Islamic country when the entire system is running on Islam. It's not a cherry picked. It's not vigilantism. So the main thing that this hadith is telling us is about the sanctity of the blood of a believer. Now, the reason why it says believer, does that mean that, so a non-believer is okay to? No. We have to remember something, that the Muslims were persecuted and their own community was all they had. It was all they had. So when you talk about a human being, when you mean Muslim, you mean a human being in your society. It was not a multi-ethnic society where people had all these different religions and no religion and citizenship. It wasn't like that. So many of the hadith that seem to speak about the sanctity of a Muslim, what happens is that was in a context where everybody in the society was Muslim. And the hadith saying it's a Muslim is a reminder that this is how you should behave with your fellow brother or sister. But there are also hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says basically he's going to be the prosecutor of anyone who is a non-Muslim, who is under the care of the Muslim polity. If they're abused, if the rights are taken away, he will be the one defending them. So the rights always extend to everyone. So what this means is everyone, every human being's blood is sacrosanct, sacred. It is not halal. Except those are and then someone will say, well, so therefore there's no government. There's no way to tell. No, there's a governmental procedure. And this is why it is the necessity, only the Muslim society. First of all, this is why it's very important to have laws in a society. Because who decides? Once law goes to the street, and this is a problem in some countries, in our Muslim countries, this is a problem. Someone gets accused of blasphemy, they're lynched on the street. This is not Islam. This is not Islam. Before they even make it to the court, to the police, they've already been killed. This is wrong. And we have to call this out. We have to call this out. Because this is exactly the thing that the hadith is saying, except for one of three things. But it is one of those things. But to who? Anybody? No. So this is why those exceptions were made, because the exception there is for government. In the West, these things in our situations, it actually in one sense does not apply to us. There's never going to be a time when our governments are going to be, prosecuting for adultery or apostasy, or in many places they don't have the death penalty. In some places in the States they still have that, for murder. But nafs bin nafs is basically the death penalty for murder. So it tells us of the necessity of a Muslim society to be able to implement these things. The other three things that are talked about here is adultery, murder, and apostasy. Those three things, why? Because they harm the society in such a way that it is deemed a big enough threat to human civilization. This is why. Because adultery, the which first of all causes a lot of babies to be killed, both unborn and when they're born, abandoned, causes a lot of different corruption, increases crime rates, increases all types of diseases, breaks up families, divides communities. There are many, many things which adultery does, which is wrong. However, it's not for that person which was not married, because that person perhaps does not have any chance to become chaste in that way. So it still is a major sin to have adultery before marriage. But a person who has been married or is married, that person has no excuse. They understand the responsibilities of marriage, they understand the importance of that, and they should seek it in that. But that is a threat to human civilization. So the other thing is that murder, that anytime a person is killed, if a person can kill someone and do a couple of years in jail and get ice cream and TV and whatever in jail and just go through a very, very comfortable thing, you can see the murder rate's going to skyrocket. But this is why they had this idea of, this is not started in Islam. This is even from a Jewish law, from the Old Testament, from since then. It's not taken from that, but it is reminiscent of Allah's revealing in the Torah about eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? So it's in Exodus, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So it is a nafs bin nafs. A person who kills someone, that person is in that situation. Of course, doesn't apply if we're not in those societies anymore. And the other thing is apostasy. So apostasy here, right? This is a question that people. So the civilizational threat here is the one of the hereafter. Ultimately it is the one of taking people away from their religion, because when you do something and then you open about it, you are ruining the akhirah of all the other people who decide to follow you. And the second thing is, so that's number one, that these punishments are actually deterrents. Because what is the point of a deterrent? Number one, it's not talking about private apostasy. So if someone in their heart just they're not religious, they're secular, they're whatever, that's between them and Allah. But you don't go delving into a person's apostasy. What a lot of ulama explain in modern times, at least in a way that would fit our understanding in modern times, because we believe in freedom of religion, we believe in freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, that the implications that apostasy held in early Muslim society and just in traditional societies anywhere was very different than a person deciding their religion in our time. Because we're in a time and place now where people don't necessarily, it doesn't matter what religious affiliation you are. You're a citizen of a place and that's it. You pay your taxes and that's it. Whereas before, your survival, your civilization, your all of your community was built around your religious identity. And you defended that identity, you were attacked because of that identity, you tried to preserve, so it was one of the units of preserving your polity, but preserving life at the end of the day. And so they said that when a person does this apostasy by leaving the deen and then separating from their community, it implies treason or some sort of a betrayal towards their society, high treason. So this is how they explain it in our times. The bottom line is this: it is not something that one can do for vigilante reasons. It's something that goes back to a government. And the other thing is, it's a deterrent. So the reason why you have that. So for example, if you really look at the amount of cases of actual proven adultery, we know that the requirement for adultery is what? 4 witnesses witnessing the act itself, which is extremely rare. I mean, except now, and unfortunately, in the shameless modern times, that's a different story. But otherwise, people are trying to hide it. That would be a very, very rare thing. So that punishment is there as a deterrent, or it's by confession. Same thing with murder. If someone knows that the minute they kill someone, that they will have their life taken, they'll think twice about killing that person, right? And then thirdly, for apostasy as well, whatever they personally believe, there have always been atheists in Muslim societies. People don't understand this. There have always been deviants. There have always been people who change religion back and forth into different religions. But it's that idea of coming out and betraying or committing treason, and that deterrent that kept someone from that. So inshallah. And then again, we're going to finish by saying the Islamic laws and modern society, that the latter half of this does not apply to us in terms of law, but what does apply to us is how sacred human life is. Inshallah, sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Alhamdulillah, we've gone over time today. If there are any questions, these 4 hadith, you see how key they are, They're very, very important. Are there any questions? Okay. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, inshallah, then we'll meet next week, inshallah, Tuesday. And if there are any questions later on, you can, question came up? It's always when I'm wrapping up. That's when the questions come. Bismillah, ask as many as you feel.
There's a question. How do we determine what is useful to us in terms of Deen, especially in learning?
How do we determine what's useful, especially in? Learning. That's a very good question. So honestly, you could do an entire lesson on that one hadith. So it's a good question. Number one, what is beneficial to you in terms of learning is you have to look at a fiqh of priorities. So what is most important to me in my deen? Have I covered my fard ayn? So if you have not covered your fard ayn, but you're talking about the debates between the Mu'tazila and the Ash'ira and debating Salafis and all this and why this, but you don't know your fard ayn, that's obviously a misplacement of priorities, right? The way that you know something's beneficial for you is it the most immediate thing I need to do in order to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The next thing to ask yourself is, knowing this, will this now take me closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is there something else to know that will take me closer? Sometimes the things that we that excite us about religious knowledge are not the things that we need to know. And one of the signs of the nafs is when a person busies themselves with nafil acts while they have neglected the fard upon them. The other thing that I wanted to mention, it's a side tangent, is how do you know if a thought is a genuine doubt or if it's just waswasa and OCD type thinking? The way that you know, number one, is that you're never going to be afraid. Once you start feeling fear and doubt to the point where you feel like you have to do something or you're stuck with something, that's waswasa. Okay? There's a difference between a confident and comfortable level of saying, oh, I'm not really sure. The other thing is that if something is waswasa, it will continue to cause detriment to you. You'll see some harm come up. Whereas in your deen, if you're confidently following something, but you get a doubt and you leave it, or you don't leave it, it's never going to cause you a detriment or a harm in your social life or your practice of deen in general. Sorry, that was another tangent I just remembered. So in terms of, that's fine. Okay. Jazakallah khairan. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi salam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care.